Hello and welcome to Thought for the Week. I don't think the strength of our faith is to be found in being incredibly optimistic or indeed in having a very strong will. I think it's to be found where our human weakness, perhaps at its lowest ebb, is graced afresh with the love and the mercy of God. I look to my namesake in the Gospels, Peter. I quite like reading about him. It encourages me no end. Two incidents from Peter's life serve to illustrate what I mean about faith and human weakness. In the first, you may recall, he's with other disciples in a boat which is encountering stormy conditions on the Sea of Galilee. And Jesus is not with them, but they do actually see him coming towards them on the water, and they fear he's a ghost. And Peter says to Jesus, "Lord, if it is you, bid me come to you across the water." A rather foolish thing to say, really, given the weather conditions. And Jesus says, "Come." And we're told that Peter stepped out of the boat and started heading towards Jesus. But then he became very aware of the wind and the waves and the terribly stormy conditions around him, took his eyes off Jesus and began to sink. And Peter, being very human, mercifully cried out, "Lord, save me." And we're told that Jesus extended his arm to Peter, and all was safe eventually, and they made their way back to dry land. Lord, save me. Actually, I thought I could do all this, but I realise I'm far more human than I ever dreamed. And the second episode is after Jesus' resurrection in John's Gospel. Now, you may recall that in the Gospel accounts, including John, Peter denies Jesus 3 times. A serving girl says, "Aren't you one of the disciples?" And then another group of people say, "We're sure you're one of his followers." And then a third man says, "I think you are one of his followers." And Peter denies it. And of course, he is filled with a sense of having failed. That awful feeling in the pit of your stomach when you think, "Oh goodness, couldn't I even manage that? I've made a mess of it." And on the lakeside, after Jesus' resurrection, we're told that Jesus and Peter have a conversation. And Jesus says to Peter, "Simon, son of John," another name for Peter, "do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," says Peter, and Jesus says, "Feed my lambs." Then a second time he says, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, I love you. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." And then a third time Jesus asked, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Now Peter's quite hurt by this point. And he says, almost in exasperation, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." And Jesus says, "Feed my lambs." Now there's a lovely positive commission there from Jesus to serve and to feed others, irrespective of his human weakness. And Jesus added, "When you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and go wherever you wished." It's quite a nice image which I can relate to these days. I can still fasten my belt, but I don't exactly whiz around as I used to, and certain limitations come into our lives as we get older, although I'm incredibly fortunate still to be mobile and reasonably fit, and so on and so forth. But then Jesus says to Peter, "But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." A heavy dose of realism in with the promise that he can feed others. So Peter, and I love this bit, he's so very human to the last. The old Adam, as we say, is a long time in dying in every human being. And he looks behind him and sees John, the beloved disciple, who had leant on Jesus' breast at the supper, and says, Lord, what about this man here behind us? And Jesus says, if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Follow me. In other words, Peter, very human though it is, don't now start comparing yourself with someone else and what might happen to them, but focus very simply, and this is Jesus speaking to me simply because my name's Peter, some of you might be called Peter, but to each one of us, keep your eyes fixed on me. Know that joy is to be found in service and in knowing you are weak and in carrying on by keeping your inner eyes fixed on me, and I will hold you and I will give you what you need to do my will. So our human weakness, in a strange way, is already a foretaste of heaven. Thank you.